Almost exactly 2 months ago, Mark Carney wrote this. He said, building the strongest economy in the G7 will be achieved with Canadian steel and Canadian workers. We're taking action to support Algoma Steel, to protect high-quality careers and help our steel sector prosper. I don't think anyone serious would think that Canada's economy is the strongest in the G7, but put that aside for a moment. Here's the details of the announcement that Carney announced 2 months ago. He wasn't just tweeting. He said, I'll summarize, basically, 400 million tax dollars were going from you through Carney to Algoma, and Doug Ford gave another $100 million from Ontario taxes. So that's $500 million handed out to Algoma for, you read it, great careers. So that was in September, just about 8 weeks ago. It's December, and Algoma just announced that they are laying off 1,000 jobs out of 2,500 or so in the plan. They took the cash and laid off the jobs. $500 million, 1,000 jobs. That works out to $500,000 per job, and it wasn't enough to save it. What was that line from Carney, the strongest economy in the G7? I just don't think that's true. But Carney's sort of centrally planned, centrally managed economy where big corporations lobby for grants or favors, but it's just not enough to overcome deep problems. That's not how you build a dynamic economy. That's not Detroit in 1925. That's more Detroit in 2025. You know, 100 years ago, Detroit was the fourth largest city in the United States. Can you believe that? Just booming. It had the highest wages in America. Detroit. It wasn't some centrally planned scheme. It was the innovation of the automobile and then the free market and the competition amongst different automakers. The high wages were not a gift from Henry Ford. That's what he had to pay to attract workers in a competitive automobile industry. It's so opposite in Canada today, isn't it? It's very sad. Now it's about who can you coax money out of in government. Now, I know it's nuts since Carney is an economist and he worked for a series of banks, but I'm not sure he actually knows how businesses work, how money is made, how steel workers get their jobs, how Algoma is supposed to make money. I think he just knows how to spend money, not how to earn it, and he's very political about it all. He seems to hate manufacturing, factory, steel, oil, building block, things like that. I mean, remember this?
But does that not ultimately trickle down?
No, because what the big companies are producing, by and large, are not products that we are consuming. There's some element of that, but by and large, you know, a steel company, how much steel are you using these days, Todd? I mean, not as much we used. Sorry.
Or even this. Let me play the long version of this, which is worse than the short version.
This pipeline going to come, so.
So boring.
It's not actually.
It is. No, but it is. It is because it's. Look, it's. Don't worry. We're on it. We're on it. Like we're on it.
And
but there is this whole world.
Party?
Okay, hands up. Who's working on the pipeline in this room? Okay.
Isn't that a problem?
No. Look at all the variety. Like, Nav. Like, does your like it's? We have.
Yeah. If there's more prosperity, they'll get more cell phone services.
But look, okay, so what's going to drive, one of the things, don't worry, we're on the pipeline stuff, Danielle's on line one, don't worry, it's going to happen. But, well, something's going to happen, let's put it that way. It's not very good negotiating by my perspective. But what some in the room will unlock on the data center side, the intelligence infrastructure side, will have a much bigger impact on productivity in this country. Will have a much bigger impact on our standard of living. And advantaging that, which is what we're doing with the productivity super deduction. Like, it's an easy conversation to have about a pipeline because it's one thing we can see. But the reality is that there's much, much more to the Canadian economy, and there's much, much more to the future of the Canadian economy. And so we're attacking it on all sides.
You know, he's childish. He uses made-up words like advantaging, but essentially he's bored by oil and steel and things like that. Or maybe just that his own portfolio stocks doesn't include them. They're not exciting enough. He's about things like carbon capture and the environmentalist idea that you can make steel without burning coal somehow. It's what he keeps demanding that steelmakers like Algoma do. Instead of making extremely high heat that you need for steel from burning steel-making coal, which is how steel has been made for centuries, he wants it to be done using green electricity that just doesn't work. Here's what Penny Haidu, perhaps the least qualified cabinet minister in Mark Carney's government, no offense to graphic designers, but she was a graphic designer before becoming a cabinet minister. That's not really someone who was fit to be a minister of jobs. I just don't think it is. No disrespect to graphic designers. I just don't know if that's the best person to be your jobs minister in this economy. She's literally never created a job or met a payroll in her life. Here's what she said last night. I'll just give you the short version. She didn't know what to say. Here's the long version. The federal government is standing with Algoma Steel workers and with Canada's steel sector. What does that mean? You're not physically standing with them. You already gave them $500 million to the corporation to save the jobs. And the statement, by the way, she gives doesn't even mention that. Pretty sure Patty didn't even read the contract with Algoma before handing over $500 million. And then come her deep thoughts. She said, quote, "The situation is serious." Thanks, Patty. We didn't know. "Global markets are shifting quickly, and relying too heavily on a single trading partner has left our industry exposed. We are working hard to shore up domestic production and make sure workers have real immediate support." Are you really working hard, Patty? Are you doing what exactly? What can you do? She says, quote, "At the federal level, strong tools are already in place to protect workers and stabilize the sector." But I guess they're not if 1,000 people were just laid off. What are you saying? Why are you using such bafflegab? What strong tools are you talking about? Are you talking about the $500 million you just gave 2 months ago? Didn't work. Are you going to use that tool again? Quote, "We are tightening controls on foreign steel imports, and our Buy Canadian policy ensures that major defense, energy, and housing investments translate into jobs here at home." It goes on a bit. But they've got nothing, though. They don't know what to do. How could they know what to do? Trump wants to move factories back home to America. That includes car factories and steel factories. I honestly don't know if there's anything Mark Carney can do about it. I just don't know. But Carney promised that he alone could handle Donald Trump. That's what he said. That was his essential promise in the campaign. Now he bristles when anyone even mentions Trump, like they did the other day.
Who cares? I mean, it's a detail. It's a detail. I spoke to him. I'll speak to him again when it matters. I mean, the sort of, comme j'ai dit, nous sommes très occupés. Nous sommes très, très occupés avec l'avenir du Canada. Nous sommes maîtres chez nous et avec les nouveaux partenariats. Et il y aura des conversations, oui, avec le président et moi, probablement dans les prochaines 2 semaines. Mais on attend de... I'm always happy to. Sorry, I slipped into French because I anticipated the en français thing. I look forward to speaking to the president soon, but I don't have a burning issue to speak with the president about right now. When America wants to come back and have the discussions on the trade side, we will have those discussions. I'm going to answer a potential question here, and then I'll pass back, which is, for example, with respect to Ukraine and the 28-point plan. We are a core member of the Coalition of the Willing. You would have seen a demonstration of that yesterday with the meeting of European leaders, a core group of European leaders, the Prime Minister of Japan, ourselves, and which formed a common position. And that common position is communicated. Our national security advisors are meeting today in Geneva, including Canada's, and the common position communicated to do the additional work that's required on the peace plan there. Each of us do not need to call President Trump and communicate that position.
I don't know if Canadian steel can be saved. I hope so. I can tell you the Liberals care 10 times more about those 1,000 steel jobs than they care about the 100,000 oil and gas and pipeline jobs they've destroyed over the last 10 years. Which brings me to a sort of obvious solution. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but oil pipelines are made out of steel. I looked it up, and the proposed Northern Gateway pipeline from Alberta to BC, that's the one that the Trudeau Liberals canceled, that would have used about $1 billion worth of steel. Same thing for the Keystone XL pipeline that was canceled. That one was canceled by Obama, to be fair. And then there's the mighty Energy East pipeline that would have gone from Alberta to New Brunswick. That would have been steel too. The entire construction for that Energy East, it was such a big deal, would have been about $16 billion just for the pipeline. And none of that money was from the government. The government killed that deal. Do you see where I'm going with this? There are two ways you could try and save a Canadian steel company. One is through endless loans and grants and standing with you tweets. The other is to actually, build things with steel, or to be more precise, let the private sector build things with steel and let them pay for it. No need for a centrally planned economy where Mark Carney has the power of some Roman emperor to say thumbs up or thumbs down based on his whimsical emotional reaction. And to say the obvious, the purpose of a pipeline, Northern Gateway, Keystone XL, Energy East, isn't just to spend money building them. I mean, those three pipelines together, by the way, would probably be $30 or $40 billion just in construction jobs. Imagine that. But the purpose of building them is to put things in the pipelines to ship through the pipelines for decades. Oil, mainly, which would allow all sorts of other jobs to be created to make the oil to fill up the pipelines. Like, the pipelines aren't just an end, they're a means to an end. Mark Carney has a choice, really. Does he love steel more than he hates pipelines? And the answer, of course, is no, he doesn't. Because if Algoma were successful on its own by selling steel to pipeline makers, what would Mark Carney's role be? He sees himself as the godfather or something, granting this project, blocking that one. It's all up to him. He's the boss. He pretended for a couple of days to be supportive of a pipeline idea. That's what he had to say to Danielle Smith. But listen to him in Parliament, where he basically says, yeah, sure, the pipeline could happen, but really the deal is about green schemes, including carbon capture technology. And of course, he says this in French.
What about people in the caucus and this new agreement? Well, I think it's important to recognize that this memorandum of understanding is not just an MOU. It involves a data center, an AI data center, and also it involves connections between Alberta and British Columbia when it comes to net hydroelectric power, and yes, a pipeline, but at the same time, there must be a major investment in carbon capture. So it's a grand bargain, and that creates the possibility of accessing energy sources in Western Canada that are more diverse, cleaner, and of course that creates a Canada that is more independent of the United States.
That doesn't make any sense. It's just like that bafflegab, the word advantaging. If he really wanted to save Algoma, he would greenlight Northern Gateway, Energy East, Keystone XL, and he would beg those pipeline companies to come back to Canada and try again, and he would promise not to interfere with them again. But he's going to interfere with them. That MOU, Memorandum of Understanding for Oil Pipelines, it's not for oil pipelines. As I noted to the Alberta Premier last week, all the pain is front-end loaded. The industrial carbon tax is going up. That happens right away. The pipeline itself, if it ever gets built, will happen by, I'm not kidding, the MOU says as late as 2040. Here's a Carney cabinet minister saying, and he has not yet been corrected for saying this, here he is saying that both the province of British Columbia and First Nations, not defined, can stop the pipeline. He says the pipeline needs their consent. That's his language. Take a listen.
Are your BC caucus colleagues comfortable with the idea of a bitumen pipeline through the Great Bear Rainforest to the north coast of British Columbia, and with the changes to things like the tanker ban, because these have been issues you ran on in the past as a party and as a government that are now potentially on the table for removal?
Well, David, I think what Liberal members of Parliament for British Columbia and across the country are comfortable with is a process that requires the participation of Indigenous communities, that ensures that jurisdictions implicated are part of that process and conversation, that we are working together to ensure that the criteria that have been set by the Prime Minister are met. And I think, when we are talking about a theoretical pipeline, as the Premier herself noted, that doesn't have a route, that doesn't currently have a proponent, that doesn't currently have the support, or has not yet gone through the process of getting the support of jurisdictions in question as well as First Nations. I mean, this is a theoretical conversation right now. And our job should be to focus on the practical. The practical is making sure that the process to do those things is done correctly, to have conversations about major projects in a way that we have articulated. Anything that goes to the Major Projects Office to be referred has to have the consent of the jurisdictions in question, has to have the consent of First Nations. And right now, these are all, we have an MOU that is an outline, a roadmap to have a further conversation.
By the way, which First Nations can stop the pipeline in the Liberal view? There are 600 bands in Canada. Do they have to be along the pipeline route? Can any one of them block it, or does it take two, or is there a magical number? And who in the band? Can it be the chief just talking? Does there have to be a vote? And where does this power come from? Is this a new law somewhere? Are we now taking the position that there is a veto over industrial projects by a particular ethnic group? Can people who were married to Aboriginals speak out on this? What's the plan? Or is the idea to keep it so vague that no one would be foolish enough to try? Hey, while we're at it, can we understand the new rules here? I mean, laid-off steelworkers get not only total sympathy, but lots of money. But oil and gas workers get neither. They have to pay for the privilege of working and building. They have to spend money on things like carbon capture that no one is trying to capture the carbon in real life. It's not of any value. And oil and gas is called dirty, as opposed to Mark Carney's clean energy. By the way, out of the corner of your eye, have you been watching Donald Trump lately? And the Department of War, as the old Department of Defense is now called, and Venezuela? You paying attention to that at all? A few months ago, Trump declared drug cartels to be terrorist groups, and he's been blowing up little smuggling boats for weeks. Now, there's an important legal reason to declare them terrorist boats. That changes the law of how you go about killing someone. It's not a criminal matter anymore. It's a war, really. But you don't need the USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest ship ever built, the largest, newest American nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. You do not need the USS Gerald R. Ford to take on little speedboats. The U.S. Navy has mustered a mighty flotilla off the coast of Venezuela, and they've even reestablished an old Air Force base on Puerto Rico. They've just started using it again for jets that are too large to fly on an aircraft carrier, because it's only about less than an hour's flight from Puerto Rico to Venezuela. That is an impressive show of force. And the whole world knows what the U.S. military can do after watching some of its activities, including against Iran. But look at this on the State Department's official website. I had to check twice to make sure this was real. This is real. Wanted, Nicolas Maduro Moros. Reward increase of up to $50 million. That's like the kind of rewards they would post in the Wild West. Bounty, $50, except for this at $50 million. U.S. dollars. That's a lot of money, and no tax on it. That's a lot of money for anyone, let alone in a poor country like Venezuela. If you are Maduro's bodyguards, are you tempted just a teeny tiny bit? Or maybe if you're some political rival or some general in the army, are you tempted to take the 50 mil? Why not? If Maduro's gone, it's pretty sure the country's going to have a better path forward. Certainly you would have a better path forward for your family and $50 million. I'll do another monologue another day about Venezuela and why I think Trump's going to topple Maduro one way or the other. I think he's going to do it. But today, let me just talk about oil. I bet a lot of people would think Saudi Arabia has the world's largest oil reserves. And they'd be almost right. Saudi Arabia is a huge oil producer. Along with the United States and Russia, they each pump around 10 million barrels of oil a day. It's enormous. But in terms of reserves, that is proven oil still in the ground, did you know that Venezuela is number one in the world? It is the biggest. It's bigger than Saudi Arabia. But I bet you can believe this, they barely produce 1 million barrels a day compared to 10 million for America, Russia, Saudi. That's what socialism and corruption will do to you. So imagine Venezuela post-Maduro. Let's say something happens and Maduro is toppled or flees. Someone takes the 50 mil. I don't know. Maduro runs away. I don't know. And a new leader is in place. And the country is poor. It's unmoored from its former allies. So I don't know if you know this, but Venezuela has sort of been colonized over the last few decades by Russia, China, and Iran. And also, I know this is sort of crazy, even Hezbollah has a base of operations in Venezuela. Can you believe it? All of those groups are on the back foot right now. I mean, obviously, America is not just the global power, but it's the regional power. Remember the Monroe Doctrine. That's this American foreign policy doctrine that holds no other major power can operate in the Americas. They all have been. The fastest way to get Venezuela on the path to prosperity, though, which is the path to stability and the path to freedom, is to develop its massive oil reserves. And you can bet the United States will be first in line. In case you don't know, as Venezuela started going down the road of socialism a few decades ago, they expropriated billions of dollars worth of assets from U.S. oil companies like Exxon and Chevron and ConocoPhillips. They were all operating in Venezuela until Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro came along and just grabbed them, just took them, just seized them, nationalized them. And they had some help from Russia, and they were allied with Cuba, but all of those allies are looking weak right now. You think Russia's going to divert military equipment and manpower from Ukraine to help Venezuela? You think Iran and Hezbollah, which are both smashed, are going to come to Venezuelans' aid right now? Do you think China's going to muck about there? I think that Venezuela's going to be toppled, and it's going to be an oil player pretty back soon. You know that Exxon, Chevron, ConocoPhillips are all going to be back in Venezuela minutes after any soldiers land, and you can bet that Venezuela will soon go from 1 million barrels a day to 3 million barrels a day, where it was about 25 years ago, to why not 5 million or 10 million barrels a day? They got as much oil as anyone in the world. Why wouldn't they be on par? And here's my point. That oil is going to go to the United States, most likely. It's the closest huge market. And which do you think is going to happen sooner? That new Venezuelan oil coming up to the United States by tanker ship right into Texas, right into Louisiana, where all those refineries are that process heavy oil. There's heavy oil in two places. One is called the oil sands of Alberta. The other is called Venezuela. That Venezuelan heavy oil is going to come into the United States. Do you think that's going to get there sooner? Or do you think Mark Carney and Talib Nur Mohammed, that guy, that MP from British Columbia, do you think the Premier of British Columbia grudgingly is going to allow an oil pipeline to be built by the year 2040? Let me phrase it one more way. If you personally, just pretend for a minute, had billions of dollars to invest in oil, would you try to get to the front of the line in Venezuela and get in on that action? Or would you choose the 10 to 15-year heavily politicized plan that Mark Carney has for you? Oh, if he's not too bored by it already. So yeah, my heart goes out to 1,000 unemployed men in Algoma. It really does. They're learning what it's like to be in a country where heavy industry is considered boring and dirty, and where the Prime Minister has no clue what to do about anything other than to give temporary handouts. Stay with us for more.